Hello and welcome to Total Sports match preview for the West Indies versus Australia T20 Series. My name is Bennett and my co-host today is Yannick Quintal. We'll be going through what to expect going into this T20 Series between West Indies and Australia for the next 5 matches. And we'll start with recent history. For the West Indies, they go into this on the back of a defeat to South Africa in that 5-match series, 3-2. So coming into this, they'll be looking to bounce back against the Australians and secure a victory going into the World Cup later this year. We'll start with team lineups and go from there. So, Yannick?
Yeah, so my projected team lineup is looking like this. So we have Evan Lewis and Lendl Simmons opening. In the middle order, we have Chris Gayle, Nicholas Pooran, captain, Kyron Pollard, Andre Russell, Shimron Hetmyer, and closing out would be Dwayne Bravo, Fidel Edwards, Fabian Allen, Obed McCoy, and Fidel Edwards. Not Fidel Edwards, sorry, Jason Holder. My bad. The bowling attack would be Obed McCoy, Fabian Allen, Dwayne Bravo, along with Fidel Edwards, Andre Russell, and Jason Holder. Just a quick correction. I have Shimron Hetmyer lower to the end. I rather have him between like Pollard and Pooran, somewhere in the middle, somewhere more in the middle there, instead of lower to the end, closer to the bowlers. Jason Holder would be that guy filling in that spot before Dwayne Bravo comes up. So yeah, that's my projected lineup. What do you think about the lineup there?
Yeah, I could agree with you mostly for the lineup. I think we have a difference in terms of Lendl Simmons and Andre Fletcher. I would pick Fletcher over Simmons in my squad personally. But I think Simmons has something that he could offer to the team. I'm not sure he's going to offer as much as what Fletcher would if he was in the side, but I think we'll see how that goes over the 5-match series. I think they might switch it up, if anything. We also have with Fabian Allen, if he's fully fit, I expect him to play for sure. But if he's not, I can see this young guy, Kevin Sinclair, maybe getting a chance in the squad.
I agree with you on Fletcher. Fletcher's a really good batsman. He had a couple of good games in the South Africa series. I just prefer Simmons because although his last game he came out early. Lendl Simmons is historically good opening batsman, whether it be across any of the T20 leagues. So that's why I have him as my pick for opening alongside Evan Lewis, who Evan Lewis has been one of our best batsmen coming out to the South African series. Another thing I want to note, the ODI squad dropped earlier, and it's featuring names like Shea Hope, that is the vice captain in that squad, and they also have guys like Ruston Chase, Quintal coming off an injury, guys like Akil Hussain, Alzari Joseph, Jason Mohammed, Anderson Phillip, and those guys. Romario Shepherd as well. Do you see any of those names that intrigue you that might be a part of the actual T20 squad going forward?
For me, the only guy I really see coming into the T20 squad is Sheldon Cottrell, because we know what he could do in the T20 format with his bowling. I think maybe that extra bowler would help us, but that means to be seen, because that'll be a battle between Odin McCoy and Cottrell, if anything, because I'm not sure they're going to drop Fidel Edwards if he continues bowling well. So I do think Sheldon Cottrell has the opportunity, but I'm not sure about anybody else. And I also think that Shai Hope has a chance if the team continues to back Paul in the middle overs, because we know he could bring a bit of security in those middle overs, which would help the team tremendously right now.
Yeah, and speaking of the middle overs, the middle order batsmen seem to be struggling in that regard. So guys like Chris Gayle, who had a good game with a 32 from 24 balls, but he has since been like on the lower mid-teens, more single-digit runs. You have Kyron Pollard, who had a monster game. He was 51 from 25 balls in one of those games, but again, his thing was fluctuating and whatnot. Andre Russell, his last game was a duck. You have Nicholas Pooran, who had a couple of good games, but he was kind of struggling to make it out into the 20s and whatnot. Chris Gayle, like we mentioned before, Shimron Hetmyer, he had a couple of good games as well, but there's still like that inconsistency that's been going on in the middle order. And you mentioned that Shehu could be a decent addition to that middle order. What do you think is the problem with the middle order batsmen? What do you think is the problem? And is it something that it can be fixed going into this series?
For me, I think the problem is mentality. I think the team has a mentality that we're gonna play our way and not play according to situations. We're gonna just hit the ball hard, hit those fours and sixes regardless, and they're not gonna run as many singles. I think that mentality needs to change to prosper in the middle overs. You need to be willing to run those twos and singles and threes if on offer, and really put yourself in the contest. You don't want to just relying on your boundary hitting to bail you out every time you have a 5 dot ball over. You want to be getting those ones and twos so you don't end up in a situation where you have 5 dot balls or 6 dot balls in a over. So generally, you want to be rotating the strike. And I think Shea Hope offers that to an extent if he comes in the squad. But that's only if the guys continue to be struggling with it throughout the series and leading up to the World Cup.
All right, so I want to discuss a little bit about the guys that we need to watch for Australia. A quick detour. So I'm looking at the last match that Australia, the last set of matches that Australia had versus New Zealand, and the names that are popping up often. Aaron Finch, he had a decent outing in terms of the batting. He had 69 from 40. He had 69 from 44 game. He had a 79 from 55 game. That's a good batting from him. We have Marcus Stoinis. He is he's an all rounder and he had good spells up and down the series. Also a notable name that wasn't there was Mitchell Stark, but he's coming back into the he might be coming back into the fold for T20. Besides those names, are there any other players on the Australian team that could see some trouble, that could see West Indies into some trouble?
I think the only other name I could think of would be the leg spinner, Adam Zampa, who's a decent leg spinner. I think he could trouble this West Indies side if they don't bat him properly. But if we do play him well, I think they shouldn't really have much trouble with it. In terms of Mitchell Stark coming back in, I think he's just going to, in terms of how he generally jumps back into the T20 side often, I think he's going to be fine with that. Generally, as he bowls a Yorker and he has a good few deliveries that he could bowl in the death also. So I don't think he's going to struggle coming back into the side. So I think West Indies will need to watch out for him, especially as he's going to be looking to prove himself going into the World Cup. Because I remember recently he readjusted his action, which is going to help him swing that ball back into the right handers a bit more. So I think they're going to need to watch out for that. But besides Stark, I think Aaron Finch, as a captain, when you're a captain, you obviously have the ability to be a leader in the side, and you have to be one of the best players in the side. So I think he's going to try and lead from the front and get Australia off to a good start. So I think he's going to be one to watch early on. In terms of Marcus Stoinis, I'm not really fully sure what to expect him coming into the series. I know he had a few spells with the ball, but in terms of his batting, I'm not sure that he's going to be that player that we saw last season, the previous season's IPL, where he made some runs at the top of the order for Delhi Capitals. Coming off this season's IPL, he hasn't been in good form, so I'm not sure what to expect him batting-wise. Another guy we should watch out for is probably Glenn Maxwell, who comes off pretty good form after the T20 tournament in India there, making a few 50s, and he was batting very well in that competition.
Yeah, you talked about Glenn Maxwell. He had a 70 from 31 game in the third T20. And if I get this correctly, I think in the fourth T20, he also had 18 from 9, as well as he had 2 wickets from and only allowing 14 runs in that game. So he's another all-rounder that we need to look out for as well. Another Australian, Ashton Agar, he had a couple of good games too, with a 23 from 13 on one side, and on the other side of the ball, he had a 6-wicket game from allowing 30 runs. So he's definitely another name that we need to look out for as well. Looking at just going back to the West Indies again, putting the focus on them now. A guy that I'm looking forward to is Evan Lewis, and we talked about Evan Lewis before. He's really turned up the baton. He seems to be one of the better batsmen in the West Indies side right now. He bookended the series against South Africa with 71 from 35 game in his first, and he closed it off with a 52-run game from 34 runs. My only thing with Lewis is that it seems to me that he's been leaving a lot on the table in terms of what he can actually give us in terms of run output. I think like for whatever reason he's leaving runs on the table. So like he starts off hot and like he kind of lets himself plateau and then like he kind of relinquishes it to the rest of the batsman on his side. And I think for Lewis, in order for this the batting lineup to be even better than what it is, because it's a really deep batting lineup that we have on paper, he needs to finish off these. He needs to finish off these overs, finish off these runs that he's been getting. Like he had a 71. He looked like he could have very well get a century from that game. Um, and maybe his added output could give the middle order less stress going forward, put less pressure on them to provide runs for them because the more we see Lewis, the less that we get to see some of the other guys, and that's good because there's less wickets falling from our side. What do you think about Lewis? How do you think his batting can affect the middle order? Maybe that helps him.
In terms of Lewis, I think that he actually is leaving runs on the table. When you make 75, the only question asking is, why couldn't you make 100, make 50? Why couldn't you go on and make a 90? What's holding you back from going that extra step and really securing a victory for the team, putting the team in a winning position? So I think with him, it's mental. I think he thinks that, okay, I made 50. I think I helped side enough. Now I'm just gonna bat my way and play my shots. And that's generally how he gets out, playing rash shots when it doesn't need to be played. And if you make a score, you need to back up that score and help you and make sure you ensure that your team goes on to win. Because you can't make 75, 50 and a team goes on to lose. That's not really constructing an innings in a sense. You just played for you in that sense. So I think what he needs to do is play for the team and bat throughout the overs. He needs to be there at the end as an opener. Because if you see Aaron Finch batting, he's one of a very highly rated T20 batsman. And you do see him a lot of times batting throughout the innings. In those middle overs, he's there at that time. In those middle overs for Evan Lewis, that's when he generally gets out, which is a concern for the West Indies.
And finally, do you see anybody on the side that needs to probably step up the performance? I think the bowlers, I think we're good on the bowling end, but it's really that batting lineup that needs to step up. I think one of the names for me is Andre Russell. He seems to be struggling. He had a duck in the last game of the series, although he had a couple of single-digit run scores. That's not what we expect from Andre Russell now, is it?
For me, I think Russell would be fine. I think he'll work out his own problems because I don't think in terms of the games, even if he hasn't been performing with the bat as he usually does or as he does for the IPL side, I think he does set up with the ball and in the outfield. So I think it balances out in a sense. So he's not leaving the team lacking so much that they're going to struggle. But if I do expect him to come good with the bat this series. So I don't think we have much to worry about him going into World Cup. A player I think should really look out right now is Nicholas Pooran, who is struggling heavily in the middle order right now. I think he needs to go analyze his game, analyze himself, and realize that I figure out the role he needs to play in the team. Because right now I'm not sure what role he's playing because he's not playing that hard hitting batsman role and he's not building an inning. So right now he's the guy in the middle there who's kind of lost, so needs to improve. In terms of the next guy I was talking about is Shimron Hitmaya, who right now he himself knows that he isn't performing at the best of his ability. He's getting out playing shots that he doesn't need to play at poor times. So I think he needs to work on that also. So I think Pooran and Hitmaya would be the guys I look at in the middle there to say, you guys need to take some ownership of the situation and bat longer and bat smarter.
Yeah, talk about Pooran. He had 9 of 11 in the first game. He had a 26 from 28 ball game as well. But other than that, the scores have been kind of pedestrian. As well as Hitmaya, he had 17 from 10. As well as, I'm looking at the scratch sheet here, another 16 from 15 game from Pooran. Hitmaya, 7 from 12. So those are pretty pedestrian numbers, especially knowing Shimron, Hitmaya, and Nicholas Pooran being really, really good batsmen. So I agree with you on that sentiment there that those guys need to step up. I still think Andre Russell's another guy too, but you say not to worry, so I'm not going to worry either. What about? Do you see that the bowling attack? I think the bowling attack would be the X factor against the Australian batsmen. like you said, we kind of worry about Finch and those boys getting forward, but I see guys like Uber McCoy who had a really good series against South Africa. He had a 3 for 25. He had a 3 wicket game in one of the matches there, as well as Dwayne Bravo, who had 2 for 24, a 2 wicket 24 runs allowed game, as well as a 4 wicket game where he only allowed 19 runs. Partner that with Fidel Edwards, who had a good run of success down the stretch as well. Target Andre Russell and Holder and even Pollard as well, because he's a good bowler as well. Do you see the bowling attack being that X factor that would possibly push West Indies to a overall win over the Australians in the series?
I think for us, if our bowling attack functions at its best, we should beat Australia. But I do think that remains to be seen in terms of what the batsmen do, in terms of whether we're going to be chasing or defending totals. At this point, I'm not sure West Indies' ability to chase right now is at its best. I don't think we saw that in South African season. They haven't been able to chase scores like 160. So I'm not sure what they're doing about that behind the scenes to correct that. But I think with the bowling well enough that it should restrict Australia to decent totals that the batsmen should be able to chase. It's going to be an interesting series, in my opinion, to see whether West Indies puts things together and forms at their best, or whether they fall apart in front of this Australian side.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. Looking at the scores again, West Indies, the game seems to be won between the 160 and 170 mark. So if we could stifle the Australian batsmen to maybe like around 150, or hopefully maybe our like our 140, 150 range there, like stifle them if they're batting first. I think that's a reasonable score that the West Indies can make. Obviously, if it reaches to around 167, 170, around that range there, we might see a bit of a struggle, especially if Evan Lewis could up his performance in the opening, as well as the middle order coming up. I think that would go a long way. But like I said, like I began saying, I think the bowling attack would be an X factor in trying to limit the amount of runs that the Australians are chasing or setting the score. So I think, yeah, that bowling lineup would be a big X factor for us going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the bowling lineup would be very crucial going into the series. Yannick, I just want to get your predictions here on what you see, how do you see the series going? Where do you see the West Indies winning it, also Australia winning it? What do you think about that?
Oof, that's a tough one. Seeing that West Indies, while they didn't have a bad series against South Africa, it wasn't really a good one either. There's still work that needs to be done again, especially in the middle order as well. If the middle order could come alive in this game against Australia, in these games against Australia, and for some of them who needs to pick up form, this is not the ideal squad to say, right, we're gonna get our string of games going here against Australia, because Australia is like one of the tougher teams in the world in T20. So I'm seeing West Indies coming up a bit short, so they might get the 2-3 results. I don't see them getting swept by the Australians by any means. But I see them coming up a bit short, especially if that middle order doesn't come to them, especially. What do you think?
For me, I'm gonna make a bold prediction here and say West Indies take the series 3-2. This is in hope that everything comes together for the side. I think if they come together, they should win out against this Australian side. That's even missing guys like David Warner and Steve Smith. So I think we have enough potential, enough ability there that if we put everything together, we should beat this Australian side.
It kind of helps that the West Indies are playing this series at home, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there's any fans there, but just being in around similar conditions and similar surroundings, it just might give them that little bit of edge against Australia.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think there should be a little bit of fans. They think they're allowing fans who are fully vaccinated, but I think that home advantage should help the team a lot, because the wickets here aren't going to be spinning as much as they would in other places. So I think It should help the team with that home advantage, but I'm not going to say that's going to be the deciding factor. I think that's going to just aid the side in going on to get the victory if everything lines up properly. And I think that's about wraps us up for today, Yannick. I think that covers all our topics. Thanks for joining us here at Total Sport. You have a good night, and thanks for joining us.